Well, hello and welcome to Aim for More, a podcast where we talk about restoring your God-given identity and renewing your God-given purpose through authenticity, insight, and mindfulness. I am your host, Dr. Karen Vanderhoff, and welcome to our new adventure. So why is it so hard to make friends? I hear some version of this in my office almost every week. I don't know how to make friends anymore. I don't have any friends. I don't have anybody I can call or I can count on. You know, growing up, we learned how to work and we learned how to date and most of us got married and we learned how to parent, but it seems like nobody really taught us how to build friendships. Somehow along the way, we've grown anxious about simply introducing ourselves to new people. Somehow saying, "Hi, my name's Karen, what's yours?" has become panic inducing for most of us. We seemed to do okay in school, and we seemed to navigate the playground and the lunchroom and our extracurriculars with some regularity and some success. And yet building a healthy social support network in our adult lives has become quite challenging for most of us. I hear this from adults of all ages, those who are my age in their 40s, and I hear it a lot, unfortunately, from my clients who are in their 20s, that once they're out of school, they're finding it really difficult to find places and people to connect. And we can discuss for a long time why that is, and we'll maybe touch on some of that today. I know these cell phones are a big reason why, but the reality is that community does not magically happen. I have to lovingly challenge our assumptions around friendship and relationship because many of us are just much too passive in this area and we sit back and wait for friendship to come to us. But the reality is that if you're lonely, it's not because something's wrong with you, at least not likely. It's because adult friendship requires intentionality. Building a healthy social support network is our responsibility. It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of effort to build it and to sustain it. And that might be hard to hear. But it's also really hopeful because if it wasn't our responsibility, if the lack of social support and the lack of friendship was something that just happened to us, well, now we're in a victim place. And now we're in a place of hopelessness. And what I want to communicate to you today and encourage you with today is that community doesn't happen accidentally. It is indeed our responsibility to build and sustain it, and that there are things you can do to have the community you want. That it's not a place where you are stuck being a victim. It's not a place where there's no hope at all. That actually, the fact that it's your responsibility is the hope you have for developing the community and the friendships that you so deeply, deeply desire. So, yes, loneliness is real, and yes, it hurts. No, community doesn't happen accidentally. But there's a lot of hope for exactly what we want. Let's get into it. So, why does loneliness hurt so much? It hurts because we were designed for connection. Connection with others draws us closer to God, and it helps us become the people God meant us to be. We were simply not meant to do life alone. God designed us to be in community, and He recognized from the very beginning that we needed one another. He created Adam, and He looked at Adam, and He said, "Oh no, it is not good for man to be alone." Now, I understand that most people see this next verse as the creation of marriage, and certainly it was, because God then gave Adam Eve. But it's also the creation of friendship. God, over and over in His Word, shows us what it means to do life together and points us towards the importance of relying on others as part of navigating this world. First of all, he models it for us in his Trinity. Those of you who don't have a Christian faith might be confused by this aspect of God, that he is three in one, that he is God the Father, Jesus Christ the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And it is confusing even for the most seasoned believers. But what we know is in his oneness, there are three distinct, unique aspects, and they relate to one another. And in their relating, they model for us how to do the same. And God shows us examples like King David's friendship with King Saul's son, Jonathan, that they were closer than brothers and cared for one another so deeply. In Ecclesiastes, King Solomon says that two are better than one. A cord of three strands is not easily broken, two friends in the Holy Spirit. And that two are better than one because if either falls down, the other can pick them up. And woe to those who has no one to pick them up. Jesus modeled this. Jesus had his three best friends, Peter, James, and John. Did you know that? They were the select. They were the inner circle. And Jesus was unapologetic about that. I wonder if maybe we should follow suit. So he had his three best friends, and then he had the 12. And then beyond the 12, he had his other followers. Remember, he sends out different groups of people who he loved and did life with, but he had his inner circle of three and he had his 12. And then there's the book of Acts, a beautiful book of messy relationship, of the church trying to love each other well and doing it very imperfectly. And yet, the message is, even if it looks messy and even if it's not perfect, you still do it together. And so over and over, God tells us we have to do life with other people. We simply weren't meant to be alone. So why does loneliness in adulthood feel so different than when we were kids? What happens? Why do friendships seem to get so much more challenging? I don't know that it's all that complicated. I think really what happens is we get away from our innocence and we get away from the natural places where friendship occur. So if you think back to when you were in school, adults facilitated friendship for you. You had probably a situation where you sat in table groups with your peers. And then you went out to recess together and you likely played with other people who had similar interests to you. And you joined activities where there were other kids who had similar interests, and you learned how to work in a team. And I understand that for some of us, it was never very easy. And for those of you out there who were bullied or felt left out and rejected in high school, or even middle school and earlier in life, I'm truly sorry. This podcast gives you hope too, I hope, to like, hey, it's never too late to learn how to do friendship. For those of you where friendships came very easily in those times, and now maybe you're struggling, that's okay too. I guess I want to make sure that I encourage us to remember that relationships develop because of effort and because we work on the skills that are needed to have healthy relationships. And if it's skill-based, we can always get better. So whether elementary school, middle school, high school was full of tons of friends for you, or whether it was a disaster, you can still have deep, meaningful friendships now. My story of friendship is complicated, and so I understand both sides. I had, throughout my life, beautiful friendships and also times of bullying and awkwardness and loneliness. In elementary school, I had a beautiful class of peers who really accepted me despite my quirkiness. I was a weird nerd of a kid, and yet they loved me and included me, and it was a safe place. I had a really beautiful time in elementary school and had play dates and had ton of I really had like a Norman Rockwell idyllic childhood. My house was in a neighborhood just full of kids my age, and we just ran the neighborhood. We played basketball in my driveway because I had the best basketball court, and um, so kids of all ages gathered in my driveway, and we ran the neighborhood playing Ghosts in the Graveyard. I'm not even sure what the rules were, but we seemed to know them then. And we rode our bikes to the local swimming pool every day in the summer, and we walked to school together every day during school and walked home together. And it was truly idyllic. It really was the be home by the time the streetlights come on situation. And we rode our bikes all over and just thought we were kings and queens. And then the worst happened. The very worst, as far as a 12-year-old is concerned. My dad lost his job and got a new one, thankfully. And that meant we had to move right in the middle of 6th grade. And my new town that became my hometown then, I was miserable. And I chose to stay miserable for about the next 2 years, all the way through junior high. And I had a really hard time getting to know my new classmates. 6th grade's not a great time to move. And I struggled, and my neighborhood wasn't the same, and my house wasn't the same, and my school wasn't the same, and the teachers weren't the same, and I missed what I saw as home. And remember when I said I was shy and nerdy and weird? I was still all those things, and I was aware of those things, and I didn't know if these new students would accept me. And honestly, I'm not sure I even gave them a chance. I was so insecure and so sad, and so longing for my old community and my old school and my old friends that I was not a good friend. It was not easy to be around me at all. And I really withdrew. And um, there was sometimes I got picked on, for sure. I didn't even know that my parents really knew. I'm really thankful that they let me sort it out, because the reality is I was going to be classmates with these students for the rest of the time. I went to a really small high school in the middle of rural Iowa, and these were going to be my peers, and I had to work it out. And the reality is, once I decided to get happy and accept my situation and accept that this was my new school and this was my new community and this was going to be where I was going to grow up, those kids were just as accepting and just as nice. Now, again, I know that's not everybody's story. In fact, I have to confess that at my 10-year class reunion, I went up to one of my classmates and I said, "I'm so glad that you're here. It's good to see you." And she said to me, "I almost didn't come." I said, "Why is that?" And she looked back at me, she said, "Karen, my experience of high school is not the same as yours. I did not have it as easy as you had it." Now, two things. One, she was telling me the truth. Also, she was making some assumptions about what my experience was. But I got to admit, her assumptions were pretty close, because I ended up having a great experience in high school when it comes to friendships, not um, without troubles. There's always drama, right? But the reality is I had more friends than I even realized. And that's another thing I want to remind us of, is sometimes our perception doesn't necessarily match our reality. So I carried throughout life this idea that look, I am a nerd. I am. I carried this perception that that was a problem. And here's the thing, it's not. It's absolutely not. People accept me for who I am. I was having a hard time accepting me for who I was. And I was assuming that people would reject me because I was nerdy and because I liked to read and because I had different hobbies than them. And it simply wasn't true. This classmate of mine actually did experience rejection and loneliness. And it was so brave of her to come back. So I get that there's all different kinds of experiences. When we're not having a good experience in community, it's still not reason to give up. There's always new opportunity to form the relationships that you need. Because once high school is over, we had a next phase in life, right? For many of us, that was college. I still, despite having lots of really great friendships in high school, showed up at college thinking, I'm weird, I'm awkward, no one's going to want to be my friend. And the awkwardness, I want to tell you, I'm not being self deprecating. I really am awfully shy and I really can be quite awkward to the point that I knew I needed to practice. Remember, I said this is a skill. And so knowing it's a skill, later in, um, after college, I joined my church's hospitality team so I could practice these skills of meeting people. And the hospitality team was simply supposed to introduce themselves to people at church who were there for the first time or who looked a little bit lost or alone. And I was so good at this, note the sarcasm, I was so good at this that the leader of the hospitality team got me a shirt that read, "Sorry, I'm awkward, sorry." And it was in good fun. But we still talk about some of the situations that led her to the point where she actually ordered me this shirt because I sure took some normal social situations and made them awfully awkward. I hope that actually encourages you too, because the reality is some of those people I introduced myself so awkwardly actually ended up joining my small group, and I'm still friends with them to this day. An attempt at building relationship that goes sideways doesn't necessarily mean it has to end in complete disaster. It can in time become something that you both laugh about. But it took me a while in college too to build good friends. And here's what I want you to hear. It was mostly me. It was my own insecurities, my own lack of reaching out. And God is so gracious because he knows how important community is. So I believe if you seek it, he's going to give you opportunities. But it won't just happen. I often remind my clients that unless they want to be friends with only the pizza delivery person, they're going to have to get out of their house. Friendship gets hard because we get in our own way. There's other reasons too. I've mentioned moving. Moving was a challenge because the reality is a lot of times friendships require proximity. Now, I have some beautiful long distance friendships, and I am so, so thankful for them. And they play such a beautiful role in my life. But if that was all I had, it wouldn't be enough because I need people in proximity who I can literally walk with, not just figuratively, who are in my daily routine. I need people whose house is close enough I can show up at their door and they can show up at mine, that we can share a meal together, that we can share a gym or a grocery store and run into each other, that we can borrow cups of sugar and eggs from. That is important. And we need proximity to have regular touch points with people. One of the things I have to encourage you is that once you find some people that you start to do things regularly, you have to be that intentional. One of my favorite routines with some of my favorite people is that we do dinner at least once a week together because we just enjoy each other's company so much, and it is sacred. I protect that night really, really well. And it helps that our puppies love to play together too, and it just brings us a lot of joy. A lot of times our careers take us different places. How about this one? Have you ever had someone get married and then you lose them as a friend? Friendship gets harder when our life stages change. I get that. But marriage and adding children is not a reason to abandon your friends. I'm going to say it again. Getting married and having kids is not a reason to stop having friends. Does it make it harder? In some ways, but it also makes it much more needed. I'm really thankful that so many of my friends stayed committed to our friendship even when they got married. This was a huge deal to me because I got married so much later than most of my friends. I've only been married for a year. And so most of my friends have been married for 15, 20 years now. And I would be really, really lonely if all of my friends said, peace out, I'm married, you're not, so we can't be friends anymore. But I hear that complaint too. Well, there's nobody in my age bracket who are single, or I don't have kids, so I can't hang out. Age and stage, I can't find that as a requirement for a relationship in the Bible. So I've got friends who are 15 years older than me, and I've got friends who are 15 years younger than me, and I've got friends who are single and friends who are married, and I've got friends who are divorced, and I've got friends who are widowed, and everything in between. And I'm going to argue that the different stages and phases that we go through in life actually makes all of us better. One of the things that I appreciate about my friends is that they wanted me in their life not just because of who I was, although that was the first reason, but because it also gave their children another picture of how to do life. They didn't see my singleness as a hindrance, but they saw it as bringing another option to the table for their children to look at. And I loved being invited into their family as a bonus adult who got to love on their kids when I didn't have my own. And now so many of those kids are getting married and having kids of their own. And oh man, it feels like I've got all these grandbabies, even though biologically I don't have any. And it's kind of awesome because I get to show up when I want to and I don't have to when I don't want to. But here's the thing, when your life stage changes, it takes another level of intentionality. So for a season, my friendships looked like sitting at Little League games and joining in on family game night and going to concerts. Not the rock and roll kind, the middle school band kind. And it's awesome. It's the best. And so don't put limits or make assumptions, because my friends and I found that would happen too. So often I would make an assumption that they were probably busy having family time and that I would just be in the way. And so often my friends would assume that since I was single, I would have these big grand plans and would not want to join them for pizza and a movie. Don't make the assumption, make the ask. And then be honest if you don't want to do it. Because as many times as I've sat at Little League games, I've also equally said, yeah, I don't think so tonight. Thanks for the invite. And it's okay. I also want to point out that friendship shifting is normal. It happens. Sometimes friendships change because they need to, because it's run its course and it's not healthy for you anymore. And sometimes things just shift even though nothing has necessarily gone wrong. And I've had both of those things happen. I've blown up a relationship because I just honestly wasn't a very good friend. And I've ended friendships because they weren't really necessarily a great friend for me anymore. And I've also experienced where, I wonder what happened. We just kind of went different directions. Shifting friendships can happen for a couple of different reasons. Proximity can be a big one. For years, I lived next to a really dear friend, and yet I knew that our friendship was built largely on the fact that our houses were next to each other. And I just had a sense that once I moved, because I was renting, once I bought a house and moved, that the friendship probably wouldn't look the same. And that turned out to be the case. And so the day I left that apartment and moved into my own house, there were big, big hugs and a lot of tears. So I think we just both knew. Nothing happened other than I moved. And when I see her around town, there's big greetings and big hugs and catching up. But there's not a lot of intentionality outside of that. We needed the proximity to actually be friends. And once the proximity was no longer there, the friendship wasn't as frequent or as intense, right? So I think proximity is a big, big deal. But again, don't make assumptions. When I got married last year, I didn't see my friends as often for, I think, obvious reasons. I was attending to my husband and learning how to be a wife, and I had less time. But one of my friends and I had a conversation. I said, hey, I'm so sorry I haven't been as present as I've been in the past, and I'm going to start to change that. And she looked at me, she said, I'm sorry that I haven't been around. I just keep assuming you don't need me anymore. And I think we make that assumption that, well, they're married, so they don't need me. And that's not true. I'm going to argue that we actually need friends even more when we're married, because don't forget what the wedding's about. It's not really about the party, although Jesus loves a good party. His first miracle was at a wedding. No, we need friendship even more when we're married, because it takes the witnesses that watched us and affirmed us in our vows to help us keep our vows. So you need your friends even more. Friendship changes. It doesn't necessarily mean that something's wrong. And it's not an excuse to give up on friendships either, even when they end in a hurtful or painful way. I've said it before already. I'll say it again. You have to be intentional. You get the theme here. Waiting for friendship rarely works. So you have to be the one who initiates. I often have clients ask me, when do I get to stop being the one who does the planning and the inviting? And the truth is never. It's always up to us to develop the friendships and the social situations that we desire. And if we become somebody who regularly invites, you know what actually happens? You end up with invitations. But even that does not stop you from being the one who invites. You have to continue to put yourself out there. And being the one who invites is risky. It risks being told no. It risks rejection. This Friday, my husband and I are going to have a neighborhood barbecue. I've lived in the neighborhood for a year, and I've only met a handful of the neighbors, and usually just on walks around the neighborhood. And I said, I think it's time we have a bonfire. And so I printed off really cheesy invitations on paper, and not seriously not Pinterest quality at all. Just cut with the scissors on plain paper and shoved them in my neighbor's mailbox. I have no idea if anybody's going to show up. It might just be me, Dave, sitting outside by ourselves, eating s'mores by ourselves. But that's not the point. The point is to pursue the relationships that you desire, to offer the invitation, and let people accept it or not. Invitation does risk rejection. But we can tolerate rejection much better than we think we can. And so effort consistently over time will lead us to the relationships that we want. So often when we get rejected, it really has much more to do with the other person and not a whole lot to do with us. Now, when you are rejected, when you're in a relationship that fizzles or maybe even just plain explodes, because friendship breakups, they're the worst. A lot of times we do have to look in the mirror first and ask ourselves what we contributed to the problem. And it's important for us to work on becoming the kind of friend we actually want to have. But we also need to look for the kind of people that we know we need. Henry Cloud and John Townsend talk about this a lot. They say when we're looking for people to be in a relationship with, we need to look for safe people. What are the traits of a safe person? Safe people are responsible and accountable. They take ownership for their behavior, and they don't shift blame. Safe people are open to growth. They are humble, and they know that they need to change. Safe people are empathic and kind. In other words, they genuinely care. Safe people respect your boundaries. They allow you to be you, and they don't invade your spaces, and they respect who you are. They respect your no. Safe people are honest. Not cruel in their honesty, though. They follow Ephesians 4, which says we speak the truth in love. Because truth without love is harsh, but love without truth is patronizing. They're consistent. They are reliable and predictable in how they interact with you. You can count on them. And they offer you grace and forgiveness when there's a breach in trust or a mistake made, because there will be. A safe person does not equal a perfect person. It's a person who owns, who grows, who's kind, who's respectful, who's honest, who's consistent, and who's willing to offer grace. Where do you find these people? That's the other question I get. I don't know where to go. Well, you need to go places where these kind of safe people are. I'm going to say something that might seem controversial, and I'm not sorry. I don't think you're typically going to find these people at a bar. If you want to hang out with high quality people, you need to go to high quality places. So most of my friendships developed at church. Statistically, it is really, really good for you to participate in a church community. And the research shows that's true even if you don't believe in God. Your health outcomes are better and your relational outcomes are better. Another good place is to invest in hobbies that you enjoy. So a lot of my friends I found at the gym because there are other people who are spending their free time working on their physical health. I found that running clubs and biking clubs were some of the most welcoming and kind people I'd ever met. So encouraging. I would suggest that you start in your own neighborhood because proximity is so important. So print off silly little invitations and stick them in your neighbor's mailbox and have a bonfire. And one of my favorite ways to find people who you might connect with is to volunteer. There's just something about doing something for others with other people that bonds you. I've met so many friends and had so many good, deep conversations while packaging meals to be sent overseas or while building a house in Mexico or a lot of my best friends, we survived being leaders for our church's middle school youth group. Some might say we've trauma bonded, but there's something beautiful about serving others alongside people. But remember, no matter where you find the people, it's still on you to be the one who invites. And when you show up these places, you have to be brave enough to say, "Hi, my name's Karen. What's yours? Hey, I really enjoyed serving with you today. Would you like to grab coffee? Man, I really like biking with you every Tuesday night. Would you maybe like to grab lunch tomorrow during the day?" You have to seek it out. I, I know we like to protect our spaces, but it also requires us to be open enough, I think, to invite people into our homes. And that doesn't mean you have to clean up before they come in either. Um, I, I've lived alone until a year ago when I got married. And so keeping my house clean is not hard. It's just me. And even now, I've married the one man who's actually neater and cleaner than me. I never thought that would happen, but here we are. And I've learned that sometimes that intimidates my friends, had at least, and it kept them from inviting me over to their house because they had a whole bunch of kids tearing up their house. And so I've started to leave laundry out or dishes in the sink because I don't care. I don't care what their house looks like. I'm there to be with them. We need to remember that. We don't care. We care about the people, not the place, but being invited into your space is part of who you are. And I want to say too, not everybody has to be your best friend, but everybody needs a few people. Remember Jesus's model for us. He had his 3. And I actually encourage you to pick your people really intentionally. I know it feels a little bit like elementary school when we had our best friends and like it feels weird to rank your friends, but I really do think I would encourage you to identify who are my 2 or 3 people that are the ones I would call at 2 a.m. when I'm in the hospital. Who are the people that I'm going to share everything with? So I had those people. I have those people. I'm so thankful that when I was wrestling with a big decision, I could count on them to pray for me, that I could share the most vulnerable, deepest, scariest parts of me. And those are the people I'm going to try to see every single week, if possible. And then you broaden it out to your 12. Who are those people you're going to touch base with maybe monthly? You've got your weekly, you've got your monthly, and you've got your crowd. And you're going to be really glad that they're in your circles, that you see them at church, you say hi to them at the grocery store. And maybe you get together with them a couple times a year. But remember, God also says iron sharpens iron, so pick people who challenge you. Pick people who tell you the truth. Pick people who pray for you, who celebrate with you, who grieve with you, who hold you accountable. Pick people you can be gut level honest with, who you can be really transparent with, that you can trust to hold you accountable. So often we give people access to our lives that they really haven't earned it. Here's a place where you really should pick 2, 3 people who you give permission to hold you accountable, where you've given them a vote, if you will, because they've earned it, because trust has been built over time. And so when I was dating Dave, there was 3 or 4 people in my life who had a vote. Thankfully, they voted yes. And speaking of Dave, marriage does change friendships, but it shouldn't replace it. Unfortunately, some of the loneliest people I know are married. Even though friendship is not covenantal like marriage is, it's still deeply, deeply valued. And so marriage doesn't mean you get rid of friends and your spouse can't be your only friends. And I'm talking to guys a lot on that one. So I leave you with these questions. Who are you doing life with? Who are the people in your life who know the real you, who you can tell them all your fears and all your dreams and confess all of your wrongdoings and ask for help, and you know they're going to accept you? What kind of community are you building around yourself? Don't wait for a crisis. By then it's too late. So if you look around and you don't have the community that you desire, what invitation do you need to make this week? What next step? Where do you need to go? What do you need to do to make this different? Whose hand do you need to shake? Who do you need to be intentional with and invite into your life, knowing they might say no? And if they do, then you go on to the next. Community doesn't just happen. So find the courage to take the next step to seek it out. It might start with you working on becoming the type of person you would want to have as a friend. But remember, we are all in this together. We are called to help one another aim for more.